Welcome, dear friends, to tonight's bedtime story. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the stars above guide you into dreams. Each story is filled with magic, kindness, and wonder. Now, snuggle in and let's begin. Tonight's story, Hansel and Gretel, takes us deep into the shadowy woods, where two children find a house made of sweets. But inside waits a clever witch with a hungry plan. Let's see if courage and quick thinking can lead them safely home. Hansel and Gretel lived with their father and stepmother in a small cottage near the edge of a dark forest. Their father was a kind woodcutter who worked very hard, but their stepmother often complained because there was not enough food. The children were gentle and cheerful, and they loved each other very much. One morning, the stepmother frowned and said sharply, "There is not enough food. We must leave the children in the forest." The father was shocked and very sad because he loved Hansel and Gretel, but the stepmother argued until he agreed. Hansel listened quietly and began to think of a plan. That night, Hansel went outside while everyone was asleep. He picked up shiny white stones that sparkled in the moonlight and filled his pockets with them. Gretel asked what he was doing, and Hansel whispered, "Don't worry, I have an idea." She held his hand tightly, trusting her brother. The next morning, their father led them deep into the forest. The tall trees stood like giants all around, and the shadows grew darker as they walked. Hansel quietly dropped the stones behind him, one by one, counting softly to himself. Gretel walked beside him, watching carefully. At last their father told them to rest, and then he walked away, leaving them alone in the forest. Hansel and Gretel waited, but he never returned. The forest was quiet and still, with only the wind whispering through the trees. Tired and sad, the children lay down and fell asleep. When the moon rose, the white stones began to shimmer like little stars on the ground. Hansel smiled and pointed, "See, Gretel?" Together they followed the glowing trail through the dark woods. Step by step, they walked until their little cottage came into view, and their hearts filled with joy. Their father saw them and ran quickly to meet them. He hugged them tightly with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I am so sorry, my children." Hansel and Gretel felt safe again, but the stepmother was not happy. She crossed her arms and frowned, her heart still cold. The stepmother grew angry once more. She told the father, "Take them deeper into the forest this time." Hansel tried to gather more stones, but the door was locked. At breakfast, he quietly filled his pocket with breadcrumbs instead. He leaned close to Gretel and whispered, "This will work." Once again, their father led Hansel and Gretel deep into the forest. Hansel quietly dropped breadcrumbs along the path, hoping they would guide them home. The children grew tired from walking and sat beneath the tall trees. They leaned against each other, closed their eyes, and fell asleep, dreaming of home. When they woke, Hansel pointed to the ground, but to their shock, every crumb was gone. Birds had swooped down and eaten every piece. Hansel and Gretel looked around nervously, realizing they were lost. The forest seemed bigger and darker than before. They held hands tightly, realizing they were truly lost. The tall trees stretched high above them, and the shadows moved like strange shapes. The children held hands as the wind rustled through the leaves. Hansel tried to be brave, but he felt afraid. Gretel squeezed his hand and whispered, "Don't worry, we are together, and that makes us strong." After walking for a long time, the children grew tired and hungry. Suddenly, Gretel gasped and pointed ahead. In the middle of the forest stood a tiny, shining house. Its roof glittered with candy drops, its walls were made of cookies, and its windows smelled of sugar. Hansel broke off a piece of cookie and tasted it. Gretel licked the sugar window and smiled. "It's delicious," they laughed, forgetting their worries for a moment. Just then, the door creaked open, and an old woman stepped outside. The old woman had a long, crooked nose and shiny rings on her fingers. She smiled gently and said, "Come in, children. You must be tired and hungry." Hansel and Gretel followed her inside, not knowing that her eyes were sharp and watching them closely. The old woman was really a wicked witch who wanted to keep the children forever. She locked Hansel in a cage and laughed. "You will grow fat, and then you will be mine." She made Gretel cook and clean every day. Gretel was frightened, but stayed calm, remembering Hansel's words. "Think, Gretel. Be smart." Days passed slowly in the candy house. Hansel grew weaker behind the bars, and the witch grew more impatient. Gretel kept watching and waiting for the right moment. She fought carefully until at last a clever idea came to her. One day, the witch told Gretel, "Check the oven and see if it is hot enough." Gretel shook her head and said softly, "I'm too small. Please show me how to do it." The witch bent over to look inside, and in a flash, Gretel pushed her in and slammed the heavy door shut. The oven rattled and banged, but the witch could not escape. Gretel rushed to Hansel's cage and unlocked the door. Hansel stepped out with a smile of relief. The two children hugged each other tightly. "We are safe now," Gretel whispered with joy. The house was filled with treasures and sweets. Shiny jewels sparkled in every corner, and cakes covered the tables. Hansel filled his pockets with jewels, while Gretel gathered cakes for the journey. Together, they left the wicked house behind, and the forest suddenly seemed brighter and friendlier. At last, Hansel and Gretel reached their little cottage. Their father saw them and ran to meet them with open arms. He hugged them again and again, crying with happiness. The stepmother was gone forever, and the children felt safe and loved. Hansel, Gretel, and their father shared the jewels and cakes. They had enough food, clothes, and warmth from then on. Their home was filled with laughter and love. The children had learned to be brave, clever, and kind. And together, they lived happily ever after. And so Hansel and Gretel learned that courage and cleverness can light the way home, even through the darkest woods. With that, our story comes to an end. May your dreams be filled with kindness and wonder. Good night, little dreamers. Until next time, sweet dreams under the stars.